I started to notice a sort of grey object moving to my left, and it wasn't distinct at all. It was just as if there was a slight movement. And slowly it moved round the side of me and started to take on sort of form. It started to take on sort of arms and legs. It was quite a frightening experience. I noticed that I was hyperventilating. I just had to force myself to do something about it. And so what I did was turn to look at it to try and assess more accurately what it was. And in that process, as I looked at it, the thing sort of slowly disappeared.
Vic's experience is typical of many reported ghost sightings. But being a scientist, he was determined to dig deeper. The next day, the same thing happened again, and this time, objects in the room were vibrating.
My guess was that as we had no heavy equipment actually attached to the room, it was sound and it was airborne. So then I went off to find out where it might be coming from, and that was relatively easy. It turned out that a huge extractor fan had been fitted.
The fan was producing infrasound, a low bass frequency inaudible to the human ear. Combining this information with NASA's research on the effects of infrasound on the human eye, Vic had a revelation.
My hypothesis was that the low-frequency sound, first of all, caused you to hyperventilate, which brought on all these feelings of presence and that there was something wrong, and that it was also possible to cause visual disturbance. It was in your peripheral vision that would appear grey because peripheral vision is monochrome, and so you would see a grey object in your peripheral vision, which if you then turned to look at it, which is what I did, would disappear because of the high quality optics would be capable of filtering out that sort of information.
Had Vic found the answer, not just to his ghost, but many other sightings as well? Infrasound is found in many natural phenomena like storms and wind. Animals can hear it, but humans can't. Its frequency is so low, it can make our internal organs vibrate. Could it be a reason for seeing ghosts? Richard Wiseman was certainly curious to know more. In a controlled experiment, he played music to an audience. Some pieces were laced with infrasound. The audience responses ranged from anxiety and sorrow to fear and revulsion, all feelings that could be linked to the supernatural. But infrasound can't explain everything. Objects and people flying through thin air. In 1977, this very ordinary house in North London apparently became home to a malicious poltergeist. The house, and whatever was in it, became famous. An investigator from the highly respected Centre for Psychical Research was called in, Marco Gross.
So I went along, and when I got there, at this house, I realized there was something real going on.
Living in the house were the Harper family, a divorced mother and her 4 children.
Small fires broke out in drawers in the kitchen, and when you opened the drawer, the fire instantly went out. We had water coming from the ceiling where there were no pipes above, nothing to do with the roof or anything, water coming down. Overnight, things arranged in straight lines, pots of flowers arranged in straight lines on the kitchen floor, furniture overturning, big furniture.
Poltergeist means rattling ghost. It describes a spirit who wants to communicate with the living by making noises or moving things around. Was a poltergeist tormenting this family? At the center of the storm was Janet, the second daughter.
Janet was a bright girl, very energetic child. Unfortunately, during the time, sometimes she used to go into very violent trances, where she was so strong that at one time we had a social worker who was coming in to help us. She was an ex-policewoman. And at one time, Janet, little girl of 11 years old, she picked up this woman and threw her off the bed.
After 2 years, the disturbances suddenly stopped. Apart from photographs and eyewitness accounts, there was little hard evidence. Marco Gross is convinced that the Enfield poltergeist was real.
We're brought up from small children to believe that this universe, this life, this everything is as we see it. It's not. It's not nothing like it. It's a tiny, tiny part of it.
So was this poltergeist a genuine invasion by an angry spirit? Does science have another explanation?
With the Enfield case and with lots of other poltergeist cases, what you have is apparently objects flying across the room. The spirits become really angry, they enter the environment and they move objects. Now the question is, well, what's the evidence for that? Because, we know that people's minds play tricks on them. Maybe they just thought they saw an object move when it didn't actually move. Or maybe it's an actual trick. Young children love to be at the center of attention. And so when the adults aren't looking, they might throw an object. And then the adults become really excited and think that's the poltergeist at work. So we need to be able to rule out those sorts of explanations. And the only real way of doing that is to get good evidence on film, on videotape, of objects moving when there could not be any possibility of human agency. And in my opinion, the evidence simply doesn't exist.
But there is a case where some of that vital evidence does exist. In 1967, the German town of Rosenheim was about to be shaken up by a very strange phenomena. The offices of the Adams law firm began to suffer from major power surges, often to levels that appeared uncontrollable. Light bulbs burst, pictures moved, machines were disturbed. When officials investigated the power networks, everything appeared to be normal. Erich Schartl was part of a puzzled team.
After we did our measurements, we started to doubt that they were right, because there were still enormous surges in the network.
As a precaution, a new network was installed. Still nothing changed. Physicist Friedbert Karger remembers.
There was no overloading on the network, but the power station's monitors recorded massive fluctuations.
So massive that at one point the inkhead on the monitors actually ripped the paper while it was printing. These were powers that you can't imagine, and we couldn't explain them.
And then things got stranger. Telephone records showed hundreds of calls to the speaking clock, which no one admitted making. Was it a prank or something darker? Annemarie Schabel was a typist with the firm. At the time, like everyone else, she had no idea of what was going on.
I didn't really think anything of it back then. I expected it to be a fault on the line, just like everybody else thought in the office. We blamed the telecom people.
Technicians checked the telephone installations. Again, no faults were found. Walter Adam was a young man at the time.
There were also lamps in the hallway that started shaking when people walked through.
And then I realized that every time I walked through, someone said, "It's happened again." And if I turned around, the lamp was swinging.
What powers were at work here?